You may have had this thought before you even got out of bed. I'm behind in life. And when that sentence shows up, your body doesn't hear it as an opinion. It hears it as urgency. Like something important is already slipping through your hands. Your phone is still on the nightstand. Maybe it's 6:17 in the morning, maybe 6:42. The exact time doesn't really matter, because what's heavy isn't the clock, it's the feeling, a weight in your chest before a full thought even forms. Your jaw a little tight, your stomach already clenched, your breathing short, like the day has already started too late. You haven't even gotten out of bed, and some part of you is already doing the math. Age, career, money. Who got married? Who bought a house out in the suburbs? Who already has kids? Who seems more stable, more relaxed, more figured out? And somewhere in that quiet tally, you become the one who's always losing. Maybe you open Instagram. Maybe you see someone announcing a promotion. Maybe someone on a casual coffee run, smiling with a Starbucks cup in their hand, like life is moving at the right speed for everyone else, except you. And that's when the sentence comes back, clearer, colder, closer. I'm behind in life, not as drama, more like a diagnosis. And this is one of the quiet faces of anxiety. It doesn't always arrive as panic. Sometimes it arrives as comparison that feels like clarity, as pressure that feels like maturity, as urgency that feels like responsibility. From the outside, nothing looks unusual. You get up, you go to the bathroom, brush your teeth, pick your clothes, get in the car, merge onto the highway, stop at a drive-through, answer an email, join a meeting, smile when you need to, you function. But inside, something has already been taken over, because when that thought grabs the wheel, the whole day changes texture. Everything starts to look like proof that you're falling behind. Your apartment feels too small. Your salary feels not enough. Your body feels too tired. Your free time feels like guilt. Rest feels irresponsible. And progress never quite feels like progress. You might know this in a very specific way. You do things, you try, you organize, you make mental spreadsheets. You promise yourself this week will finally move things forward. But deep down, there's no finish line. Because the problem was never just what still needs to be done. It's the feeling that no matter what you do, you're always arriving late. If something in you recognizes this, notice something, gently. This isn't weakness. That thought didn't come out of nowhere. At some point in your life, it learned how to speak through you. Maybe very early. Maybe during a time when value and performance started blending together. Maybe when you quietly understood, without anyone needing to say it out loud, that falling behind meant losing something. Love, respect, your place, admiration, sometimes even safety. So now, when life slows down, when someone else moves ahead, when your plans don't match the image you once had of yourself, the alarm goes off. Not to torture you, to push you, to tighten the pressure, to make sure you never relax enough, to miss your chance. But that push has a cost. It steals presence from simple moments. It steals the quiet pleasure of small wins. It steals rest from ordinary Sundays. It even steals your ability to see what already exists, because everything gets filtered through this fear of running out of time. And the hardest part is this: the more you believe that sentence, the more you start living like someone who owes life a debt. Even a late afternoon coffee can feel like falling behind. Even sitting in the parking lot for 2 minutes before going inside can feel like failure. Even a message from a friend can trigger the quiet question, how is everyone moving forward? And I'm still here. Maybe you've never said that out loud. But how many of your decisions were born from that fear? How many times did you call something ambition when underneath it was panic? How many times did your body just want to pause, and your mind translated that as danger? Today, we're going to stay inside this thought for a while, long enough to see where it comes from, what it's trying to protect, and why it keeps coming back the moment you finally try to breathe, not to fix your life in a few minutes, but to recognize the cycle with a kind of honesty you may not have been able to hold until now. Because sometimes the most exhausting thing isn't being lost. It's living your life pushed forward by a sentence that feels true, when in reality it's just the language of your alarm. Sarah seems to be doing fine. From the outside she looks functional, responsible, even stable. But inside, the sentence, "I'm behind in life," quietly organizes her entire day, like a background alarm. She lives in a regular apartment complex, somewhere between the suburbs and downtown. Nothing dramatic, nothing chaotic. A small kitchen, a couch she bought on a payment plan, a small table with her work laptop, mail stacked near the door, a forgotten Target coupon on the counter. From the outside, it all looks like a normal life. She's 34. She works at a healthcare company in a role that runs on organization. Deadlines, short meetings, quick responses. She knows the whole vocabulary of American adult life: PTO, 401k, HR, open enrollment, annual reviews, performance goals. She knows how to move through the week. She knows how to smile on Zoom. She knows how to say, "I'm good," without thinking. She knows how to make coffee in a hurry and slip out the door with her bag over her shoulder before the elevator closes. But there's a big difference between managing a routine and feeling inside your own life. Because Sarah doesn't really live the day. She measures it. She measures how much she produced, how much she got done, how much progress she made, how much is still missing before she reaches an image that isn't even fully clear, but always seems a little farther ahead. On Tuesday morning, it starts in traffic. She gets in the car with a Starbucks cup in the console, merges onto the highway, stops at a long red light, glances at the car beside her, and without even noticing, the comparison has already started, not with facts, with symbols. A wedding ring on someone's hand, a baby seat in the back, a new SUV, a face that seems calm, which she translates as, "That person knows where their life is going." And then the sentence shows up again. "I'm behind in life." The body reacts before any argument can appear. Her chest tightens a little, her breath shortens, her shoulders stiffen. Sometimes there's even a strange physical feeling of delay, like she's running a few steps behind her own day. At the office, nobody calls this anxiety, not even her. She calls it urgency. She calls it discipline. She calls it a phase. She calls it, "I just need to get more organized." But there's a difference between organizing your life and living in a permanent state of catching up. Sarah finishes tasks, delivers reports, answers messages, schedules therapy sessions when she can. Every now and then she promises herself she'll use her Saturdays better, go to bed earlier, go back to the gym, cook real meals instead of grabbing something ready-made at Whole Foods. Small promises, reasonable ones, but almost all of them carry the same energy underneath. Not the energy of choosing, the energy of trying to compensate. Have you noticed how some thoughts don't shout, but still manage everything? This is one of them. On Wednesday night, after work, she pulls into the parking lot of her building and stays in the car for 2 extra minutes. The engine off, the phone glowing in her hand. A friend from college posts pictures of a new house. Another announces an engagement. An old high school classmate shares that he started his own company. None of this was done against her. None of it really has anything to do with her life. But the alarm doesn't care about that. The alarm translates everything into a verdict. Look, you took too long. Look, you missed it. Look, you should be somewhere else by now. And something very quiet happens then. She walks up to her apartment already tired of herself. Not just tired from work, tired from evaluating herself, tired from never arriving anywhere fully present. Because part of her is always calculating how far she still is from becoming someone who finally got the timing right. That's why the cost of this thought doesn't always look like collapse. Sometimes it looks like small avoidances. She doesn't reply to a message from someone she likes because she feels like she needs to be better first. She delays updating her LinkedIn because she's embarrassed about where she is. She avoids meeting certain friends for brunch because she imagines the questions. She doesn't book a Thanksgiving flight too early because she doesn't want to hear relatives asking about relationships, career, plans. She stays longer in the shower because in there, nobody is measuring anything. And if you look from the outside, you might say, but she's living, she's working, paying bills, moving forward. But moving forward isn't the same thing as inhabiting your own life. A lot of people who look functional on the outside are being governed by a sentence repeating quietly inside. On Friday, there's a team happy hour. She goes, laughs at the right moments, listens to stories, pretends to be light. Then someone asks, "So, what's next for you?" A completely normal question. The kind that shows up in casual American conversations all the time, but her stomach tightens again, because for most people, it's just small talk. For her, it feels like an existential audit. She answers something vague. Maybe just taking things one step at a time. Maybe still figuring it out. And maybe you know the quiet shame that can live inside those sentences when deep down you believe you should already be much further ahead. Even the weekend doesn't fully feel like rest. Because now rest has become a test. If she sleeps late, she feels guilty. If she tries to relax, she thinks about wasted time. If she opens her laptop to just get one thing done, she calls it responsibility. But underneath, she's trying to silence the discomfort of existing without producing evidence of value. This thought touches everything: money, body, love, friendship. The way she walks into Target and looks at shelves full of home organization boxes, like buying the right containers, might finally put life in order. The way she calculates how much she should already have in her 401k. The way she feels childish for not having certain answers yet. And maybe the saddest part is this: most of the time, she doesn't even realize she's suffering. She only notices that she's falling behind, as if the pain were proof of failure, instead of the result of the pressure she's living under. If this feels familiar, stay here for a moment without defending yourself. How many parts of your day have already been occupied by the feeling that you owe the world a better version of yourself? Because we haven't even touched the deepest point yet. We haven't reached the place where this sentence stopped being just a thought and became a form of inner surveillance. The alarm doesn't repeat this sentence because it's true. It repeats it because repetition creates the illusion of control. And anxiety works exactly like that, anticipating threat, reinforcing avoidance, and keeping the body on watch. When Sarah thinks, "I'm behind in life," it seems like just a thought, but in practice it's almost an internal instruction, a lens, a filter that reorganizes memory, comparison, choices, and behavior. She wakes up and the sentence already frames the day. If someone replies to an email faster, it becomes proof. If a friend announces a promotion, proof. If a date doesn't work out, proof. If a Saturday passes without big productivity, proof. Everything becomes evidence for a thesis the alarm already decided beforehand. You are falling behind. And the more the sentence repeats, the less it sounds like a thought, and the more it sounds like identity. That's one of the alarm's central tricks. It takes a temporary feeling and tries to turn it into a permanent definition. But behind this alarm, there's an older part, deeper, quieter, the shadow. In Sarah's case, that shadow has a name, the distance measurer, not because it sees life clearly, but because it measures everything in delay, difference, disadvantage, lost time. It compares in order to predict pain. It calculates in order to avoid humiliation. It runs before the fall ever happens. This mechanism wasn't born cruel. It was born protective. At some point in her story, falling behind didn't just mean taking longer. It meant something else. It meant the risk of disappointing someone, the risk of not being chosen, the risk of looking less valuable, the risk of losing connection. Maybe it didn't happen in some big traumatic moment, not the kind memory stamps with a date. Sometimes it happens through repetition, through ordinary childhood, through everyday life. A simple scene. Sarah is 11. She's sitting at the kitchen table in a normal suburban house. It's evening. Homework spread out in front of her. The TV is on in another room. One of her parents walks in, looks at her test, and asks why the grade wasn't higher. No yelling, no dramatic humiliation. Maybe they even say they know she can do better. Maybe they add the kind of sentence many adults say without realizing what it does inside a child. You're too smart to be doing just okay. It sounds small, but to a mind still learning how the world works, it can become a rule. It's not enough to be okay, not enough to be safe, not enough to exist honestly. You have to be ahead. You have to justify your value. You have to avoid the feeling of being too ordinary, too slow, not enough. Maybe in high school that pressure grew stronger. Other people seem to find their identity earlier. A group, a sport, a look, a relationship, a plan. Sarah learned quickly she was responsible, maybe even praised for it. But along with the praise came the mold, the good girl, the one who doesn't waste her potential, the one who doesn't fall behind, the one who doesn't disappoint. And somewhere along the way, the distance measurer made an internal deal. If I keep you comparing yourself all the time, maybe no one will see your flaws before you do. If I pressure you first, maybe you'll never relax enough to lose your place. If I keep reminding you that you're behind, maybe I can keep you running. And at some point in her life, that made sense. That needs to be said carefully, because a lot of people try to heal by hating themselves, as if despising their own anxiety would somehow set them free. But the shadow doesn't come from nowhere. It tried to protect you from something. The problem is this: what protected you once can imprison you now. Today, the distance measurer makes Sarah review her life like someone checking delays at an airport. Every person becomes a departure board. Every achievement from someone else feels like an announcement for a flight she missed. Every pause in her own life feels like a risk. That's why she never really rests. Because to this shadow, rest means losing surveillance. And losing surveillance feels like the first step toward losing value. You might know this trap very well, not the trap of laziness, the trap of vigilance. Your mind says it's helping you improve, but in practice it prevents you from feeling any improvement at all. Because every time something goes well, the alarm moves the target. Every time you move forward, the shadow recalculates the distance. Every time you try to celebrate, it points to someone who went further. That's the central trap. You believe the pressure is saving you, when often it's only preventing your life from ever feeling like enough. And there's another hard layer here. When Sarah notices the thought, she tries to fight it. She tells herself, "Don't think about that. That's ridiculous. Stop it. Just move on." But pushing the thought away doesn't weaken it. In fact, psychology research has shown something strange about thoughts. When you try to force them out of your mind, they often come back stronger, like a rebound. So the cycle starts to look like this. The sentence appears. She gets scared. She tries to push it away. She starts monitoring her own mind. The sentence comes back stronger. She interprets its return as proof that something is seriously wrong. Her anxiety rises. She avoids more things. She compares more, and the alarm learns that it's working. See the cruelty in that? The fight itself becomes fuel. The more Sarah tries to prove to herself she's not behind, the more her mind keeps checking for delay. The more she tries to defeat the feeling by force, the more organized her life might look from the outside, while inside she's still being governed by the same alarm. That's why naming matters, not as a clever trick, as a break in the fusion. The shadow has a name, and once it has a name, it loses a little of its power. When Sarah understands that the distance measurer is operating there, something shifts by millimeters. It's not freedom yet. It's not peace. But it's no longer complete confusion. For the first time, the thought stops sounding like the voice of reality and starts revealing itself as the voice of a mechanism. Even so, that still doesn't fix everything. Because knowing the shadow's name doesn't mean you've stopped obeying it. It only means that maybe for the first time, you can see it arriving. And after naming the shadow, there's a strange moment, almost disappointing, because nothing disappears immediately. The thought still shows up. The chest still tightens sometimes. Comparison still tries to pull you back. Sarah learns this quickly. She named the distance measurer. But the next Monday morning at 7:12 a.m., the sentence shows up again in the bathroom mirror while she's tying her hair back. I'm behind in life. For a second, she thinks nothing changed, that maybe she misunderstood everything, that if the thought came back, then it must have won. But that's not where the real change begins. It begins somewhere quieter, less dramatic, less pretty, more real, in a small space between hearing the thought and obeying it. The opposite archetype that begins forming inside her has a name too, the calm observer. It's not a perfect version of her, not some enlightened woman above pain, above anxiety, above comparison. It's simply the human capacity, trainable, imperfect, to notice what the mind says without completely merging with it. The calm observer doesn't argue with the shadow all the time. It doesn't hold an internal courtroom. It doesn't try to prove that life is perfectly on schedule. It does something quieter. It sees the thought appearing. It sees the body reacting. It sees the urgency trying to turn a feeling into an order. And even while trembling inside, it starts remembering a simple truth. A thought is not a command. That might sound small when said out loud. But for someone used to instantly obeying their inner alarm, it's almost an invisible revolution. In practice, it looks like this. Sarah is in her car, stopped at a drive-through, watching the reflection of her face in the window. She just saw a post from an old classmate announcing a second pregnancy and a new house. The old script begins. Her mind wants to speed up, measure, conclude, tighten, and for the first time, she doesn't respond with a fight. She doesn't respond with surrender either. She simply notices, I'm having the thought that I'm behind in life. Notice the difference. It seems small, but it isn't the same as saying, I'm behind in life. In the first sentence, she becomes the thought. In the second, she observes the thought. That's what the calm observer does. It doesn't erase the distance measurer. It doesn't humiliate the shadow. It doesn't kick anxiety out of the room. It simply stops every internal sentence from automatically becoming absolute truth. And that matters, because Sarah spent years fused with her own mind. Fusion is when thought, identity, and reality start blending together, when feeling starts to look like proof, when imagining something starts to feel like prediction, when fear starts to feel like confirmation. Now, little by little, she discovers a different experience. The thought can still be loud without needing to drive. One Thursday afternoon, her manager schedules a quick meeting. That's it. Just a meeting on the calendar. Before that alone would start the whole movie. I did something wrong. I'm falling behind. I'm not delivering enough. Everyone noticed before I did. Her body warms. The back of her neck stiffens. Her stomach tightens. The distance measurer shows up with its usual efficiency, but the calm observer appears a few seconds later. Not like a hero, just like presence. It doesn't say, relax, everything's fine, because sometimes she doesn't believe that. It says something more honest. I know this reaction. My alarm thinks delay means danger. I can feel this without turning it into a verdict. See the difference? This isn't positive thinking. It isn't motivation. It isn't self-deception. It's a different relationship with the mind. And of course, there are still setbacks. On Saturday, Sarah opens her laptop telling herself she'll just organize the week. 4 hours later, she's exhausted, irritated, and sad because she turned rest into another performance arena. When she notices, she judges herself. Great, I'm back in the same place. I didn't learn anything. I always ruin things. But here too, the calm observer starts shifting the direction. Not by preventing the fall, by allowing the return without punishment. It shows her something simple. A setback doesn't cancel movement. Emotional progress is rarely linear. Noticing earlier is already different from being lost in it for days. So instead of turning that Saturday into final proof of failure, Sarah does something almost invisible. She closes the laptop, takes the trash outside, feels the cold air in the parking lot, 48 degrees. She stands there for a minute, not healed, not light, just standing. And in that moment there's a millimeter of freedom. Before, the thought was an automatic order. Now sometimes it's just a sound inside her head. Before, I'm behind meant tightening more, running more, producing more, comparing more. Now sometimes the sentence appears and she notices, my alarm is active. My shadow is measuring distance again. I don't have to give my entire day to this. Maybe that sounds small. Maybe part of you wants something bigger, more dramatic, more immediate, more transformative. But for someone who lived a long time obeying the mind as if every thought were law, this space is everything. This is where a new form of presence begins. Not the presence of someone who defeated anxiety, the presence of someone who no longer kneels before every mental urgency. And sometimes this practice shows up in the most ordinary places. In the aisle at Target, seeing people with carts full of things for a life that looks more put together. At brunch, when the conversation turns to marriage, mortgages, kids, promotions. At the end of a workday, when someone talks about bonuses, vacations, next steps. On Sunday night, when the week hasn't even started and the alarm already wants to convince you that you're behind again. In those moments, the calm observer doesn't promise instant relief. It offers something steadier, inner company. It stays beside Sarah while her mind speeds up, and slowly she begins to notice something that might change everything. Without making any noise, the thought can keep appearing. Without continuing to command. The 30 days don't begin with a turning point. They begin with repetition, with forgetting, with the thought coming back again on some ordinary Monday before Sarah even finishes her coffee. I'm behind in life. This time she doesn't treat it like a sign of failure. She recognizes it. The alarm woke up first. That's all. On day one, the practice doesn't feel like practice. It feels like a small interruption in autopilot. She's in the car leaving the apartment complex and she notices the sentence arriving with that familiar pressure in her chest. Before, she would immediately speed up inside. Now she tries something simple. Notice the sentence without climbing inside it. It doesn't fix everything, but it already changes the direction. On day 3, she forgets completely. The entire day runs on the old logic. She compares salary, compares age, compares energy. She even compares her own fatigue with other people's productivity. That night, lying in bed, she feels that old silent shame, like she lost again. But this new path doesn't treat forgetting as defeat. It treats it as part of the practice. On day 4, she starts again. No beautiful speech, no big promise, just 3 small movements that keep returning like a thread through the month. Notice the sentence. Name the fear behind it. Act without obeying it. That's it. Notice the sentence. Sometimes it appears in the bathroom mirror, sometimes in the parking lot at work, sometimes during lunch break, listening to co-workers talk about vacations, bonuses, home renovations, school plans for their kids. Sometimes when someone asks a question that seems too simple, like, where do you see yourself next year? And inside that old vertigo appears, like life is an escalator moving up while she's standing still on the one going down. Then comes the second movement, name the fear behind it. This part matters, because the sentence is rarely about time, almost never about time. When Sarah pauses long enough, she sees that the real fear just changes clothes, but keeps the same story. If I'm behind, I'll be left behind. If I'm behind, I'll look like a failure. If I'm behind, no one will choose me. If I'm behind, I'll disappoint people. If I'm behind, maybe I'll have to admit I'm not who I thought I would be. This is where the practice becomes more human, because behind the sentence, There isn't laziness. There's fear of exclusion, fear of insignificance, fear of not having a place. And when she sees the fear, the sentence loses a little of its rigidity, not all of it, but a little. On day 6, she's at Target buying ordinary things, paper towels, shampoo, coffee, nothing important. Then she passes a woman around her age, 2 kids in the cart, a wedding ring. That full image of a life already assembled, the distance measurer appears instantly. Look, you took too long. Look, everyone already arrived. For a moment she almost believes it, almost hands the rest of her afternoon over to that script. But then the third movement appears. Act without obeying. Acting without obeying doesn't mean doing something big. It simply means not letting the thought decide the next choice. So she finishes her shopping, drives home, takes a shower, heats up some food, sends a message to a friend she had been avoiding. Nothing epic, but important. Because for a long time, her mind had a rule. First feel caught up, then live. Now she's starting to reverse it. Live a little, even while feeling behind. On day 8, she schedules a therapy appointment she almost cancelled. On day 9, she doesn't open LinkedIn at midnight. On day 10, she goes for a 12-minute walk without turning it into some project of reinventing herself. On day 11, she answers an email she'd been avoiding because she felt too late replying. On day 12, she leaves a few dishes in the sink and doesn't turn that into proof of moral collapse. It looks small. It is small. And small steps are what change everything. Because what's being trained here isn't performance. It's the relationship with the mind. On day 14, there's one of those setbacks that feels total. A Sunday, late afternoon, dim light in the living room. She opens old photos from college, then profiles from people she knew in high school, then slips into a chain of comparisons that lasts almost an hour. By the time she notices, her chest is tight, her jaw is rigid. That feeling is back, like she missed some invisible train years ago. The old impulse returns with force. Punish herself, correct herself, promise that tomorrow a new life will begin. But the 30-day practice isn't built around promises. It's built around returning. So that same night she does something small. She closes the app, places the phone face down, sits back on the couch, lets her shoulders rest, and quietly says to herself, without poetry, without drama, I'm here again. Not, I'm fine. Not, I'm healed. Just, I'm here again. And that changes the quality of the return. By the 3rd week, the alarm still shows up almost every day, but Sarah starts recognizing it sooner. At Starbucks before work, in highway traffic, in the elevator, standing in line at CVS. In the quiet of the evening, when the apartment gets still and other people's lives seem louder than her own. But now she can see the shapes the alarm takes. Sometimes it shows up as urgency, sometimes as shame, sometimes as a sudden need to fix her entire life in a 40-minute plan, sometimes as the urge to give up on everything before reality confirms what she fears, and seeing that makes a difference. Because there's a delicate moment now where she can say, this is my alarm trying to protect me from the pain of feeling behind. This is the distance measurer trying to predict rejection. This isn't the whole of reality. Some days that awareness lasts 5 minutes. Other days, half an hour. Other days, almost not at all. But even on the weekdays, something is still being trained. She doesn't fuse with it quite as completely. By the 4th week, quiet signs of a new freedom begin to appear. She goes to brunch and doesn't spend the entire conversation calculating the difference between her life and everyone else's. She calculates a little, but then she returns. She actually listens, bites into the toast while it's still warm, laughs once without using the laugh as armor. The presence is brief, but it's real. Another day, she opens her banking app, sees the number in the account, feels the old tightness, and instead of turning that into a verdict about her worth, she simply does what fits that day. Transfers a small amount to savings, closes the app. That's it. Another time, someone interesting texts her, and she doesn't disappear for 3 days trying to become more ready before answering. She replies the way she is, imperfect, human, present. And maybe this is where everything begins to change without looking like change. Because at first, what she wanted was to stop feeling the thought, to eliminate the sentence, turn off the alarm, never compare again, never fear time again. But the 30 days don't deliver that. They deliver something else, less obedience. On day 26, she notices the thought at 8 a.m., and it doesn't run the entire day. On day 27, she falls hard and spends hours inside it. On day 28, she returns. On day 29, she notices the body before the story. On day 30, she understands something that doesn't fit inside a motivational quote. The mind may keep producing urgency. The difference is that now, inside her, there's a part that doesn't always run when the siren goes off. And that isn't small. Before, the relationship was submission. Now it's starting to become coexistence. The sentence still appears, but it no longer defines everything. The fear still comes, but it doesn't always decide. The anxiety still tries to tighten its grip, but sometimes it meets a presence that doesn't kneel immediately. That's the real practice, not defeating the mind, not silencing the mind, not purifying the mind, learning how to live without handing every movement over to it. Today is Tuesday, 7:08 in the morning. Sarah is in the kitchen, barefoot, holding coffee that's still too hot to drink. She didn't sleep well. She has a meeting at 9. The sink isn't full, but it isn't empty either. Her phone lights up with a notification, someone announcing a promotion at work, and that's enough. The thought arrives whole, without asking permission. I'm behind in life. Right away, her body reacts. Her chest tightens, her breathing gets shallow. That urge appears to grab her phone and start the mental race before she's even left the house. Open LinkedIn, review goals, compare salaries, promise some radical life change by Friday. The alarm wants speed, it wants obedience. But today, she doesn't turn this into an internal lecture. She doesn't try to become a different person in 5 minutes. She just reaches for a small notepad sitting near the fridge. She writes 3 lines. Line 1, the exact thought. I'm behind in life. She looks at the sentence for 2 seconds. No arguing, no decorating it, no trying to prove anything. Then she writes the second line. Line 2, the fear underneath. If I'm behind, I'll end up alone and disappoint everyone. Something becomes more honest there, more exposed, because now it doesn't look like a productivity problem anymore. It looks like fear, fear of loss, fear of not having a place, fear of not being chosen. Then comes the third line. Line 3, one small concrete action. I'll drink my coffee sitting down and join the meeting without opening LinkedIn first. That's it. Nothing grand, nothing dramatic, but completely doable for that morning. She turns her phone face down, sits at the table, feels the warmth of the mug in her hands. The thought is still there. It didn't disappear. The distance measurer still wants to talk, still wants to insist this isn't enough, that it doesn't fix anything, that she should be doing more. But for a few minutes, she doesn't obey. She drinks the coffee. Halfway through the mug, her breathing softens a little. She joins the meeting still anxious, still hearing the sentence echo quietly in the background, but without handing the first hour of her day back to the old cycle. For today, that's enough. Maybe you need something like that in the middle of an ordinary day. Not a huge turning point, just 3 lines that give a name to what felt like fog, 3 lines that interrupt the fusion, 3 lines that remind you the thought arrived, but it doesn't get the rest of your day. Maybe the thought comes back tomorrow morning. Maybe it shows up in the mirror, in traffic, in the middle of a meeting, or in that quiet minute before sleep. And if it comes back, that doesn't mean you failed. It just means your alarm still believes pressure equals protection. But now maybe there's a little more space between the sentence and your obedience. Maybe you can start recognizing when the mind turns comparison into a verdict, Maybe you can notice that behind "I'm behind in life," there's often something older: fear of rejection, fear of loss, fear of abandonment. And that changes how you listen to yourself. You're not weak for feeling this. You're not broken for carrying this kind of urgency inside you. That thought didn't come out of nowhere. At some point, it tried to protect you from a kind of pain that once felt too real to risk feeling again. But living under that alarm comes with a cost. It costs presence. It costs rest. It costs honesty. It costs the chance to inhabit the day in front of you without immediately turning it into proof of your worth. So if the sentence appears again, maybe you don't need to defeat it. Maybe you only need to notice it arriving. Name it. Feel the fear underneath. And choose one small step that it didn't decide for you. The shadow has a name. And once it has a name, it loses some of its power. In your case, it might keep appearing as the distance measurer. The part of you that measures everything to predict pain. The part that believes being behind means being left behind. The part that rushes you because it's afraid. But there's another presence available too. Quieter, less spectacular, more real. The calm observer, the part that doesn't erase anxiety but sees it, the part that doesn't shame the shadow but also doesn't hand it the keys to the day, the part that can say, even with a tight chest, "I hear the thought, and I don't have to obey it." If something here touched a very private place in you, maybe it's because this struggle has been around for a long time. Maybe more people around you look put together than actually are. Maybe someone watching this today has a life that looks functional on the outside and completely exhausted on the inside. Maybe that someone is you. And if it is, hold on to this. You don't have to be on anyone else's timeline to begin returning to yourself. Thank you for staying here with me.